Shaft.
Just say what you gotta say, Big, huh?
Here's a couple of El Garcios.
He said, Richard, you have breast cancer. First of all, you know, you're kind of numb. But then you hear breast cancer.
When you went to fill out applications, what did you do? You lied.
Remember Richard Roundtree? He disappeared from leading roles because he was hiding a devastating secret that Hollywood would have destroyed him for.
And I thought he was questioning my manhood or something. You know, how could I possibly have breast cancer?
Was there shame over it?
I don't know if it was shame.
Embarrassment?
For 7 years, the first black action hero lived a double life, lying to insurance companies and hiding surgical scars during shirtless scenes.
And I said, listen, could you, I really don't feel comfortable doing it that way. Is there any way possible that, we could come up with some kind of top?
The man who revolutionized black masculinity on screen was about to learn that vulnerability could be more dangerous than any villain he ever faced. So, let's get into it. Richard Arnold Roundtree was born on July 9th, 1942, in New Rochelle, New York, just 20 miles north of Manhattan. His father, John Roundtree, worked as a chauffeur for wealthy white families in Westchester County, spending his days driving Cadillacs and Lincoln Continentals that he could never afford himself. His mother, Catherine, cleaned the same family's homes, scrubbing floors and polishing silver, while her own children waited for her back in their modest apartment. New Rochelle in the 1940s and 50s was a complicated place for black families. The city had a reputation for being more progressive than most. Its schools were integrated, and there were neighborhoods where black families could buy homes. But that integration came with a price: constant pressure to prove you belonged, to work twice as hard for half the recognition. Young Richard learned early how to navigate white spaces without losing himself. At Isaac E. Young Junior High School, he discovered that his height, already pushing past 6 feet by age 13, and his natural athleticism made him visible in ways that other black students weren't. Teachers noticed him. Coaches recruited him. White classmates wanted to be near him. By the time he reached New Rochelle High School, Roundtree had figured out the formula: excel at sports, dress impeccably, speak clearly, and never let them see you sweat. His parents' jobs in service had taught him how white people wanted to be treated, and his own charisma taught him how to exceed those expectations while maintaining his dignity. Football became his weapon. The gridiron was one place where his blackness became an asset rather than an obstacle, where his physical dominance couldn't be questioned or diminished. At New Rochelle High School, Roundtree was everything: most popular, best dressed, best looking. The football team was nationally ranked, and he was their star player. College scouts from Southern Illinois University came calling, offering him a future on the gridiron. For 2 years, he played college football, but something else was calling to him: the stage, the spotlight, the possibility of something bigger. In 1963, Roundtree made a decision that would change the trajectory of his life forever. He dropped out of college and headed back to New York, bouncing between jobs that seemed random but were actually building something crucial: presence. He sold suits at Barney's department store, learning how clothes could transform a man's image. He became a model for the Ebony Fashion Fair, one of the few platforms showcasing black male beauty and sophistication. The camera loved him. His 6-foot frame, chiseled features, and natural charisma made him a natural in front of the lens. He modeled for Salem Cigarettes and Johnson Products Duke Hair Grease. But modeling was just practice for what was coming next. In 1967, Roundtree joined the Negro Ensemble Company, a pioneering black theatrical organization that was redefining what black actors could be on stage. His first major role was portraying boxing legend Jack Johnson in their production of The Great White Hope. Night after night, he embodied a black man who refused to bow down, who fought the system and won. It was perfect preparation for what would come next. Hollywood was changing. The surprise success of Melvin Van Peebles' Sweet Sweetback's Badass song had proven that black audiences would turn out for films that showed them as heroes, not sidekicks.
I'm gonna say a black Ave Maria.
MGM was struggling, nearly bankrupt, and desperate for a hit. They had a script about a tough black private detective named John Shaft, and they needed someone who could embody confidence, sexuality, and danger all at once. Director Gordon Parks saw something in Roundtree that others had missed. When studio executives demanded he shave off his elegant handlebar mustache, Parks refused. The mustache stayed, the man stayed, and John Shaft was born. Shaft hit theaters like a cultural earthquake. Richard Roundtree strode across Times Square in a brown leather coat, Isaac Hayes' thunderous theme song pounding behind him. This wasn't just a movie. This was a revolution. For the first time in Hollywood history, a black man was the unqualified hero. He wasn't asking permission. He wasn't grateful for scraps. He wasn't noble or long-suffering. John Shaft was cool, sexual, dangerous, and completely in control of his world. He talked back to white cops, seduced women of all colors, and solved crimes on his own terms.
Why don't you stop playing with yourself, Willie? You ain't gonna do
The box office numbers told the story. Shaft earned $12 million on a $500,000 budget, single-handedly saving MGM from bankruptcy. But the real impact was cultural. Black audiences finally saw themselves as protagonists. White audiences discovered that black masculinity could be aspirational rather than threatening. Roundtree became an instant icon. The Golden Globe nomination for New Star of the Year was just the beginning. Suddenly, everyone wanted to be near him. Restaurants seated him immediately. Airports gave him VIP treatment. Women threw themselves at him on the street. The sequels came fast. Shaft's Big Score in 1972 was another massive hit, with bigger action sequences and higher stakes.
That's some cold.
Then came Shaft in Africa in 1973, taking the character international. CBS even launched a Shaft television series, though it only lasted 7 episodes, perhaps too edgy for network television's conservative standards.
That's all.
Roundtree was riding the wave of the blaxploitation era he had helped create. Films like Superfly, Foxy Brown, and Black Caesar were flooding theaters, but none of their stars had Roundtree's combination of sex appeal and legitimacy. He appeared in the disaster film Earthquake alongside Charlton Heston and Ava Gardner. He starred opposite Peter O'Toole in Man Friday. Major studios were building projects around him. But even as his star blazed brightest, forces were already working against him. The blaxploitation wave that had lifted him up was beginning to crest. Critics were calling the genre exploitative, arguing that it perpetuated negative stereotypes, even as it empowered black audiences. The NAACP and other civil rights organizations began pressuring studios to move away from these films. Hollywood was preparing to close the door that Roundtree had kicked open. The question was whether he would be inside or outside when it slammed shut. The blaxploitation era was ending as quickly as it had begun, and Richard Roundtree found himself trapped by his own success. The very role that had made him a star was now limiting every opportunity that came his way. Casting directors saw Roundtree and thought of one thing: Shaft. They couldn't envision him as anything else. When he auditioned for dramatic roles, they said he was too associated with action. When he sought out comedic parts, they claimed he lacked the range. When he pursued romantic leads, studios worried that white audiences wouldn't accept him in those roles. The roles that did come his way were increasingly marginal. B-movies with tiny budgets, foreign productions that paid little and offered less exposure, television guest spots that barely kept him visible. Roundtree was learning a harsh truth about Hollywood. Once the industry decided you were finished, they had infinite ways to make that prophecy come true. The 1981 film Inchon represented both an opportunity and a disaster.
They're all dusty. Quite a bit warm.
Roundtree was cast alongside screen legends Laurence Olivier and Ben Gazzara in what was supposed to be a prestigious war epic. Instead, it became one of the most notorious flops in Hollywood history. The film was so poorly received that it virtually disappeared from theaters after 1 week. For Roundtree, it felt like a career death sentence. The 1980s were brutal. Roundtree found himself relegated to playing what he called establishment figures. Police commissioners, army officers, authority figures with no personality or agency. The man who had once embodied rebellion was now playing the system he had once fought against. Television offered some refuge. He had a recurring role on Outlaws as a former slave-turned-gunslinger. He appeared on Magnum P.Y., The Love Boat, and other popular shows. But these were guest spots, not starring roles. Roundtree was becoming a character actor in an industry that had once built franchises around him. The most painful part was watching other black actors achieve the success that seemed to be slipping away from him. Eddie Murphy was conquering comedy with Beverly Hills Cop. Denzel Washington was building a career as a serious dramatic actor. Will Smith was transitioning from music to acting with ease. Each of their successes highlighted what Roundtree had lost, but the worst was yet to come. In 1993, while filming in Costa Rica, Roundtree discovered something in the shower that would change everything. A small lump under his left nipple, no bigger than a lima bean.
I notice there's a little lump here. I don't think too much.
As a self-described hypochondriac, he decided to get it checked out when he returned to Los Angeles. What happened next would force him to make an impossible choice: his health or his career. The doctor's office in Los Angeles. Richard Roundtree sat across from his physician, expecting to hear that the lump was nothing to worry about. Instead, he heard 3 words that changed everything. You have cancer. Male breast cancer. The diagnosis was so rare that Roundtree's first thought wasn't about survival, it was about shame. In his mind, breast cancer was a woman's disease. The doctor might as well have questioned his manhood. How could John Shaft, the ultimate symbol of black masculinity, have something associated with femininity?
And I thought he was questioning my manhood or something. You know, how could I possibly have breast cancer?
Was there shame over it?
I don't know if it was shame.
Embarrassment?
The medical reality was harsh. Roundtree would need a modified radical mastectomy, removing his entire left breast from sternum to armpit. 6 months of chemotherapy would follow, poisoning his body to save his life. He would lose weight, lose energy, and lose the physical presence that had defined his career. But the emotional reality was even worse. Roundtree made a calculated decision that would haunt him for years. He would keep his cancer secret. In an industry that already had limited roles for aging black actors, being seen as sick or unreliable would be career suicide. Insurance companies required physical exams before hiring actors for major roles. One disclosure of his cancer history could end everything. The deception began immediately. During his chemotherapy treatments, Roundtree would schedule them around work commitments. He was fortunate to experience minimal hair loss, so his appearance didn't betray his condition.
And I said, listen, could you, I really don't feel comfortable doing it that way. Is there any way possible that, we could come up with some kind of top?
When roles required shirtless scenes, he would lie about the weather, convince directors to let him wear undershirts, or find creative ways to hide his surgical scars. The psychological toll was devastating. Roundtree was fighting for his life while pretending everything was normal. He was dealing with the trauma of cancer while maintaining the facade of being an action hero. The man who had built his career on authentic masculinity was now living a lie that grew more complicated every day. His family knew the truth, but they were sworn to secrecy. His then-wife watched helplessly as her husband battled cancer alone, unable to seek the support that other patients took for granted. His children grew up knowing their father was sick, but unable to tell anyone.
When you went to fill out applications, what did you do? You lied.
The industry continued treating Roundtree as if nothing had changed, which was exactly what he wanted and exactly what was destroying him. Roles kept coming, but they were smaller, less significant. He was being slowly erased from Hollywood, and he couldn't tell anyone that he was also fighting for his life. For 5 years, Roundtree lived this double life. Cancer survivor by night, struggling actor by day. The secret was eating him alive, but he believed it was the only way to preserve what remained of his career. He had no idea that speaking the truth would actually make everything worse. Richard Roundtree was supposed to be celebrating. The new Shaft film starring Samuel L. Jackson was bringing his character back to theaters, with Roundtree playing Jackson's uncle. It was a comeback, a chance to reclaim his legacy. Instead, it became the moment when his carefully guarded secret finally exploded. At a celebrity golf tournament in South Carolina, Roundtree was listening to discussions about mobile breast cancer screenings when something inside him snapped. The words came out before he could stop them. Being a breast cancer survivor, I know what early detection means. The room went silent. Then the questions started coming. The media descended. Within days, Roundtree's 7-year secret was front-page news. He appeared on Nightline, spoke to People magazine, and found himself accidentally becoming the face of male breast cancer awareness. The response was overwhelming. Men and their wives came forward with their own stories. Flight attendants thanked him for saving their husbands' lives. Cancer organizations recruited him as a spokesperson. For the first time since his diagnosis, Roundtree felt like he was making a difference beyond entertainment. But Hollywood's reaction was very different. The industry that had slowly been marginalizing him now had a reason to accelerate the process. Roles became even scarcer. When parts did come his way, they were smaller, less prestigious. Producers and directors who had once courted him now seemed to view him as damaged goods. But Richard Roundtree wasn't ready to disappear quietly. The new millennium arrived with Richard Roundtree determined to reinvent himself once again. If Hollywood wouldn't give him leading roles, he would become the most versatile character actor they had ever seen. If they wanted to typecast him as authority figures, he would make every police commissioner and army colonel unforgettable. Television became his new home. Roundtree appeared on Desperate Housewives as an amoral private detective, bringing shades of Shaft to suburbia. He joined the cast of Heroes as Charles DeVoe, the terminally ill father whose posthumous messages guided the show's mythology. He played judges, doctors, grandfathers, and mentors, accumulating credits like a man possessed.
Invisibility. Always thought that would be a good one to have.
Each role was a small victory against an industry that seemed determined to erase him. The digital age brought new opportunities and new humiliations. Direct-to-video movies offered steady work, but little prestige. Foreign productions paid the bills, but rarely reached American audiences. Roundtree found himself in horror sequels, action B-movies, and urban dramas that barely got theatrical releases. Throughout it all, Roundtree maintained his advocacy work. He continued speaking about male breast cancer, helping to remove the stigma that had kept him silent for so many years. Medical advances meant that men diagnosed today had better options than he had faced in 1993, but awareness remained crucial. The industry had changed around him. Streaming services were creating opportunities for older actors. Diversity initiatives were opening doors that had been closed for decades. But Roundtree was now in his 70s, and the physical demands of action roles were becoming impossible. He had survived cancer, career setbacks, and Hollywood's systematic marginalization of aging actors. He had reinvented himself multiple times, always finding ways to stay relevant and employed. But time was beginning to catch up with him. In 2023, Richard Roundtree would face his final battle. Richard Roundtree was 81 years old and still working. His last completed film, Moving On, had premiered at the Toronto Film Festival, starring Jane Fonda and Lily Tomlin. He was scheduled to appear in Thelma, another comedy featuring older actors proving they still had stories to tell. But privately, Roundtree was fighting a new enemy. Pancreatic cancer, one of the most aggressive and deadly forms of the disease, had been discovered just 2 months earlier. Unlike his breast cancer battle 30 years before, this fight would be brief and public. The diagnosis was devastating, but not surprising. Roundtree had always been a realist about his health. At 81, with a history of cancer, he knew that time was running out. What mattered now was how he would spend his final months. His family gathered around him. 5 children, Kelly, Nicole, Taylor, Morgan, and James, who had watched their father navigate the peaks and valleys of a Hollywood career spanning 6 decades. They had seen him at his most successful and his most vulnerable, and they loved him for both.
The result, generally when I watch it, is one of those things that I say, okay, I could sit here and appreciate this with an audience the same way,
The entertainment industry began reaching out as word of his condition spread. Samuel L. Jackson, who had inherited the Shaft mantle, posted tributes calling Roundtree the prototype, the best to ever do it. Gabrielle Union shared memories from being Mary Jane, describing him as always the coolest man in the room. Ryan Johnson remembered his kindness on the set of Brick. These weren't just professional courtesies. Roundtree had touched lives throughout his career, not just through his performances, but through his personal interactions. He had been a mentor to young actors, a friend to struggling performers, and a symbol of perseverance for anyone who had ever been counted out. On October 24, 2023, Richard Roundtree died at his home in Los Angeles. His family was by his side. The man who had fought 2 different cancers, career setbacks, and systematic industry discrimination had finally found peace. The obituaries focused on Shaft, and rightfully so. That role had changed cinema, opened doors for other black actors, and created a template for action heroes that persists today. But Roundtree's real legacy was more complex and more inspiring. He had shown that a black man could be a leading man without apology. He had demonstrated that vulnerability and strength could coexist. He had proven that careers could survive devastating setbacks. And he had used his platform to help others facing their own battles. The first black action hero had become something even more important, a man who refused to give up. Anyway, that's it for this video, folks. Bye.